Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our July Klamath Film member meeting. We're having some tech issues on our side of things, so I'm not going to have all the slides that I prepared to show you, but I can give you a quick rundown of what's going on. And then one of our guests has already joined us here. Hello, Dominic. Thank you for being here. We have two featured guests tonight that we will get to shortly. So I guess while we're waiting for our second guest to join, I'll quickly do a recap. Klamath Film just got a nice big grant from Cow Creek Umpqua Indian Foundation, and we won the Martha Young Award, which is a special award they give out only periodically to organizations that they feel represent the interests of their founder in educational pursuits. So it's basically an honor saying, hey, we think that you're awesome what you're doing to help out with youth, so keep doing what you do. So Wayne was there for that. We had a nice little photo op over at KCC. Great opportunity for that. And there was some press coverage as well. Hi, Heather. Hello. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. We were just getting rolling. I was telling Dominic we have a smaller crowd than what we normally have for our meetings. So we'll call it a more intimate crowd. And I was just going through a couple quick announcements, and then we will get into some introductions and then get to talking to both of you about all that you do in the industry. Sound good? So in addition to Cow Creek Umpqua Indian Foundation receiving the Martha Young Award, our annual youth film camp starts on Monday, July 11th through July 15th. That's going to be at Klamath Community College. I'm teaching that. We've got 19 of the 20 slots filled right now with middle school and high school kids. So 5-day crash course in filmmaking. And then at the end of it, the kids will be able to take some of our gear, go off and make their very own first film. And we will show those as part of the Klamath Independent Film Festival. So looking forward to that. Also looking forward to the nap after teaching middle school and high school kids for an entire week. We still have one slot left. So if you know of a middle school or high schooler in the Klamath area that might have an interest for a week, it is 100% free for the kids through grant support, and they also get free lunch during the day. There's an online sign up for that on Eventbrite, and it's on the Klamath Film website. We will have our selections announced for the Klamath Independent Film Festival Sunday night. Our committee is meeting this weekend to determine the final film selections for the film festival that'll happen September 16th through the 18th at the Ross Ragland Theater. So I know several people on this call that have a film in the running, so we'll see what comes out of that. And then we're also going to be at Third Thursday, so July 21st downtown. Stop on by if you're going to be around Main Street. It's always a fun event. We will have some virtual reality headsets, and we'll have previews running of all of the films that are going to be in KIF this year. So that's what's upcoming with Klamath Film. Let's do some introductions so that our guests can get to know us a little bit. So first of all, hi, Heather and Dominic. I'm the guy that's been talking. My name's Kurt Lidke. I'm the board chair and former executive director of Klamath Film. I am a filmmaker. I'm the videographer for Klamath Community College. I'm also a commercial drone pilot. I worked in Hollywood for about 12 years before I moved to Southern Oregon, mainly in music, but also some in film and video games as well. Dom, I worked at EA and Insomniac. So I wasn't part of any Mortal Kombat stuff, but I worked on a whole lot of Ratchet and Clank and Resistance games. Cool. I've been a filmmaker for, well, since I was in middle school. So now I get to teach other middle school kids how to make their own films. So I'm looking forward to that next week. Yeah, Bowen, why don't you introduce yourself?
So hello, my name is Bowen Browder. I'm a board member for Klamath Film. I'm also a local community member in Klamath Falls. I guess what you could call an aspiring actor. I'm relatively new to the world of filmmaking or getting into it, but I'm very happy to be here nonetheless. I currently work up at the local college, Oregon Tech, as an admissions counselor, but that's kind of in a gray area right now regardless. But I'm very much, I've always been invested in storytelling of all forms, and cinema or filmmaking as an art form has always especially appealed to me. So I'm always happy to talk about it and share different aspects of it and really just talk with people about the industry and show just how interesting and engaging it can be.
Terrific. Thank you, Bowen. Wayne, hello, sir. Introduce yourself, please.
never mind. Sorry. My name's Wayne Sweat. I'm an actor. Also have produced and directed low-budget films. In fact, there's 3 of us on this call, Brooke and Bowen and myself, that were on the film just a couple weeks ago. A murder mystery that I'm looking forward to seeing. I'll keep it short and just leave it at that. Thank you.
Terrific. Brooke. Hello, Brooke.
Let me unmute myself. Hey, so I'm Brooke. I am a performer, a former Disneyland entertainer, and current mechanical engineering student and mascot at Oregon Tech. I'm also an artist and very interested in that kind of animation and storytelling in video games, as well as the voice acting side of it. So yeah, glad that you're here.
Mascot at Oregon Tech and KCC.
And KCC. It's been a while since I've done a job there, so thank you for that.
And hey, John, we thought you'd be here with us, but appreciate you joining online. Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, try to make it there, but just too many things going on here.
Totally understandable.
Yeah, just doing, like to get more into filmmaking. I've only been a member here about a year. Just trying to tie up my parents' estate, which is dragging on. But eventually I'm going to do something. But I kind of grown up mostly kind of in computer and IT stuff. And, but, my mom was always talented in a lot of different things. And so I've got a little bit of that in me still. So we'll get there, but in the meantime, I'm just going to have to appreciate what all you do and just kind of glean what info I can along the way.
Terrific. And our guests know the last person. Hello, Cassidy.
Hey guys, thanks again for joining. This is Sunny.
Sure.
He's very needy recently with his sickness, so
Sure.
excuse me looking around for the cats all the time.
Well, we like your kitty. You can hold him all the time.
Great. Perfect.
Is Twinkie still up? We could bring Twinkie in and have a.
There you go.
I think Twinkie's in
Oh,
bed.
please do. I've always wanted to be on a Zoom call with one of your birds. So
I'll text Dean.
okay, perfect.
So Dom and Heather, you probably have an idea of our organization already because you are familiar with Cassidy, of course. But just quick FYI for you, we are a 501c3 based here in Klamath Falls. We've been around for about 12 years now. We put on the annual Klamath Independent Film Festival that happens in September. It's the only film fest around that exclusively shows made in Oregon films. We also do an annual film camp for youth that starts Monday. We do cultural screenings, and we're also the film liaison office for the area. So anytime there's a production looking to come through, we're helping out with location scouting, research, cast and crew calls, equipment rentals, anything that we can do. Lots of productions, we end up lending a hand in any way that they may need. We had 9 films shot here last year. We're already up to 3 shots so far here this year, and hopefully more coming. We're talking to potentially a feature film coming here as early as late next month. So there's a burgeoning film scene here. Ashland, just down the road, has an amazing film scene, of course, but we're growing. We have a nice little community here, and Klamath Community College and Oregon Tech have film programs. Southern Oregon University in Ashland has a film program, and our local high schools are also starting to develop film programs as well. So there's a nice pathway for kids to start picking up cameras in middle school and high school and lead right into a career path. So we're really big on the educational angle here. So that's us. And then once a month, we have these meetings as a networking opportunity, a chance to talk to different people in the industry to get a sense of what they do, collect any advice that may have, and very casual, open conversation about what you do and how you got to where you are. So why don't we get started with the two of you explaining kind of how you got into the industry, and give us a chance to better know who you are and some of the projects you've worked on. So Heather, why don't we start with you?
I think it does start with me.
Yeah.
At least we're together. If that wasn't immediately clear. So I always knew I wanted to write. It started with really bad fan fiction. and
always.
which is a fantastic way to prepare for television writing. I have to say that most of my friends, especially in the sci-fi field, started out writing fan fiction. But I went to college to study film, which was not something that was offered everywhere at the time. So I ended up at Northwestern at a very expensive and high rate that I'm no longer willing to pay, not even for my own kids. And I got into their creative writing for the media program, where we were taught how to write scripts. A lot of places at the time did not have that ability. And this is pre-internet, like the olden days. So to have a script that was from a movie, we had Chinatown. We had these really classic scripts that I still have some of them on paper that we were going through, and we were annotating, and we were learning how to format the scripts, which at the time, computers were relatively new. You were having to do it by hand. The screenwriting software hadn't really been invented yet. Now they have. It's so easy to write a screenplay in the correct format. But at that time, it was something that if you didn't have direct experience, you weren't going to be able to get it. Northwestern was great in that there's pretty much a pipeline out to LA. So after I graduated, I moved to Los Angeles with $3,000 and my worldly possessions in a car and no apartment and no job. Got a job a week later because I happened to go to Chicago expatriate breakfast, sat down next to a CPA who was looking for a temp assistant. And he's like, well, you just got here. Why don't you come work for us for the next 3 months? And I was like, okay, cool. And then they tried to hire me full time. And I said, I didn't move out here to work at a CPA firm, but thank you very much. In your 20s, you can do stuff like that. And I got a job with another person I'd met at like a Chicago in the industry organization out there. And she was looking for an assistant at a newly formed film company by a former CAA agent. And she asked me to become her assistant, and I did. And then I realized I wanted to get into television writing more. So, and the thing with working in LA is basically you work as an assistant. It's the way into your future career. So working as an assistant, working on films, working in as a PA, you cannot have an ego. But at the time, it was kind of the way to get in the door of the writer's room, which is where the magic happens in TV, was that you would be an assistant and take the notes, and maybe you could pitch an idea here and there. Maybe that would get you assigned a script. It did not work that way for me, but I worked on a few episodes, like a few shows. I worked on a show about cops on bicycles, where I was a chicken on screen because I lost a bet. And it's out there because it's streaming. And then I was working for a producer, John Sacred Young, who created China Beach and had a very long career. And I had written some spec scripts. I won a contest at an organization in LA, the Scriptwriters Network. And part of that was they had agents and other writers who would read your work and meet with you. And one of those people sent my work to someone at MGM who recommended me to the Stargate SG1 writing staff. And they read my work and they invited me to pitch. And I sold them a pitch. And the sequence is, at least then, you sell a pitch and then they let you write an outline. And then sometimes they'll just take it and write it themselves, because usually people don't necessarily do this really well, especially first timers. But I remember the night that my agent called and said, so they want you to write the outline, and then they also just wanted you to go straight to draft and write the script. And then they gave me the number that they were going to pay. And it was insane. I called my mom. My mom immediately had an asthma attack. Just like, oh my God. And then I did the first draft and I sent it in, and they thought it was great, and they were looking to staff. So like 2 weeks after I turned in my final draft, they said, we'd like to bring you on staff, but you'll have to move to Vancouver. So I moved to Vancouver, Canada, and lived there for about 9 months and worked on the show and worked on the set and saw all the aspects of the production. Went back to LA and then got hired to do rewrites on a movie that was filming in London. And so 2 days later, I was on a plane to London. And after that, I was like, I'd really love to work in Los Angeles. I kind of moved here for this. And then I got a job on a show called Glory Days, which no one has seen. My episode was the lowest rated episode of network television in the week that they aired. Preach. It was February 6th, 2002, I believe. I looked it up last night because I was curious. But they stopped watching the week before. So it wasn't my episode that turned everyone off. It was the previous weeks. And then this was the era of reality television.
Yep.
So scripted TV was on the way out, and what jobs there were disappearing at a rapid rate. And it's really hard to kind of maintain a career because it's out of your control. And Dominic will realize this because we had met around then, and he'll tell you that it's not anything about talent so much. Like, it's not guaranteed. You're not guaranteed a spot. It's as much luck as talent, if not more. If there is talent, you will be prepared for when the luck strikes. The networking is so important. That's really how I got all my relationships, and it is relationship driven. It can be a smarmy business, but at the same time, the people that were assistants with me and writing assistants, now they're showrunners. Like, we see their names on our favorite shows all the time. They're people. So I actually work with middle school and high school students now. I teach them algebra and geometry, which has a performance aspect. And I've taught script writing. I don't think I would encourage it to anyone. I've done that. I've made a kid switch his major. I didn't do it. He just did it because he loved it so much. And it's like, no, don't. Whatever you're going to do it before. But, I've moved more into the just short story writing and gotten involved with the Mystery Writers of America and our chapter in Chicago, which is 13 states large, getting into horror writing. So I think that's a really long summary of my experience. In the middle of that, back in 2000, there was this guy at a party who's like, I am a director producer. And so Dominic, you pick that up from there.
Well, first, I need to jump in and interject to say your story is eerily similar to mine, except you went to LA with more money than I did. So
I probably left with a little less.
Yeah. I do remember that Cops on Bike show. Wasn't it filmed around Venice Beach? I'm blanking on the name, but it was very like Baywatch-esque, but like Baywatch with bicycles, basically.
Yeah,
I think it wasn't on the. I think it was the USA Network that it was on. If I'm trying to.
Good memory.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, because you all showed up tonight, it was a show called Pacific Blue.
That's it. Yep.
It was a fun. That was the fun gig. And so let me tell you a little something. So remember the terrible fan fiction I was writing? It was for a show called 21 Jump Street. I don't know if you all remember the 80s TV.
Yep.
I loved that show. That show had a writer producer named Bill Nuss. He's like in some of the episodes. Bill Nuss was the co-creator and executive producer of Pacific Blue. So when I joined the staff as a writing assistant, I'm fangirling a bit. And there was one day we were standing in his office and he's like, yeah, we did this PSA, a public service announcement at the end of 21 Jump Street. Sometime it was about this. And I said, oh, that was this season and it was this episode and they did it after this and here's who was in it and this is what they said. And he looked at me, he was like, that's kind of frightening, but thank you. And it all comes back. And Peter Deluise, who was one of the actors on 21 Jump Street, who played Doug Penhall on 21 Jump Street, was the director of one of my episodes on Stargate. Because he lived in Vancouver, that's where all the TV was happening in the 80s, was in Vancouver. So he had become a director, and Jonathan Glassner, who's one of the creators of Stargate SG-1, had worked on 21 Jump Street, the later season. And I'm going to tell you, if you want to really impress your boss in the future, quote their line to them, not being aware that it's from the episode that they wrote, like the first episode that they ever wrote for a show. They really like that.
there's a loose Stargate connection that I have as well. I grew up in Eugene, and I'm friends with a lot of former University of Oregon football players. And one former U of O player, we've had several on that are former U of O players that are now in the industry that we've had on as guests with our meetings. One we haven't yet had on, but that I know is Doug Judge, who
Chris Judge?
Yeah. Well, he played as DJ Judge or Doug Judge, but now he goes as Chris. Everyone on here would better know him on the show as Teal'c, or the guy with the little gold thing in his forehead on Stargate SG-1. He's also been in one of the Batman, Christopher Nolan films, and a bunch of other movies he randomly pops up in. But along with Eric and Steven, some of the other guys that we've had on as meetings, that's another U of O football player turned actor in the industry, and he's of course best known for Stargate SG-1.
It was funny because I didn't realize he was in the Batman movie until I was on a plane and I had it on my headphones, and I was like, all of a sudden, I'm like, that sounds like Chris, and I looked up and I was like, I didn't know Chris was in this movie. He was like random baddie number 3 in this.
Yep.
So is that Christopher Judge, as in the voice for Kratos in the newest God of War, or?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
That's a Dominic question.
Let's pull up IMDb while we while we
IMDb question.
bounce around. Yeah. I see Lori just joined. Hi, Lori. Thank you for being here. We were just kind of getting rolling. We just got background on Heather, how she got into the industry. We're just about to start in with Dom, but if you want to introduce yourself, that'd be great. So our guests can get a sense of who you are too.
Sure. Hi, I'm Lori. I'm a Klamath Film member. I do some volunteering. I've been on the board previously. I have helped with some backstage stuff and some spotlighting with the Ross Raglan Theater here. And I've made a couple short films. I had The Puzzle that got into KIF in 2020. And then I submitted 2 short films this year, so we'll see if either of them gets in.
I really did like the stop motion animated film that you made this year, Lori. I thought it was cool.
Thanks, Kurt.
Kudos
Yeah,
getting it done. That's a
question for
commitment. Sorry.
Yes.
Participation
Sorry.
and a few thousand pictures. Yeah.
Stop motion. I don't have the patience for. I mean, if Dom, I'm sure there's times with like animators for some of the video games. You're like, how do people sit there and work on this for like 2 seconds of film? But at least it's not stop motion that you're having to do with some of these game systems. I'm sure it feels like that with some of the animation and whatnot. Dominic, let's now that we got a chance to get to know Heather, let's find out about you as well.
So, Wayne, did you have a question for Heather before I get going?
Oh yeah, just a silly little thing. She mentioned that jokingly, I'm sure, but she produced a TV episode or something that got the lowest score out there. I was wondering if on Rotten Tomatoes, you not even get a tomato, you get a tomato juice glass,
Well, this was pre-Rotten Tomatoes, but I do remember that there's a website called Television Without Pity. Linda Holmes, who's on NPR's, who's the NPR pop culture happy hour host, and I adore her. She's one of the best critics out there. She was one of the people writing for it. So we would read the Television Without Pity recaps when they came out of our episodes, and they were scathing, but very funny. So I don't remember specifically what she said about mine in particular, but I do remember we were all of us writers were like, yeah, that's appropriate. The problem with that show was it was Kevin Williamson's sophomore effort. And when he pitched it to the WB, I'm sorry, it was the WB back then.
It was WB, yeah.
It was the WB, which was relatively new. He was coming off creating Dawson's Creek. And so he had pitched another relationship show, and it's about a guy who returns to his small island, North Carolina community after becoming a best-selling author, who kind of writes a tell-all about the people of his town. It's thinly disguised novel, and then loses all his money and has to come back with his tail between his legs, and everyone in town hates him. That was the show we were all hired on as like character writers. And then on the first day of work, they said, the network wants us to make this a murder mystery show. They literally bought us Patricia Cornwall's How to Write a Mystery book for all of us, to teach us. And that was what we had to do. We had to reconceptualize the entire series in a very short amount of time. And I don't think we ever got it right because the notes came back and then they were changing it. And one character always had to be right, but the other character couldn't be wrong. And that's not how it works. You can't have everyone right in a murder mystery. You got to have red herrings. So it was doomed from the start. It was one of those, like, you look around the room and everyone's like, this is great. This is fantastic. And you go, well, okay. But I was not surprised when it was canceled. Let's just put it that way. And Dominic remembers that, I'm sure.
I did have one question about the process of selling a pitch, like when you for SG1. So what does that really mean that you want to sell a pitch?
Let me come back to that. I want to give Dominic a chance to describe himself too, because we're going to overlap in some areas. So it might help everyone to know what he's all about.
And okay. Heather, while you were talking, we did quickly IMDb, and yeah, Doug is the voice of Kratos on God of War. By his stage name, he goes by Chris. Christopher was actually his mom's maiden name, and so his stage name is Chris. But I know him as DJ or Doug Judge.
You know better than I do, then.
Yeah. Dominic, let's get to your background.
Yeah, mine was a long and winding road. I mean, like Heather, I knew at a young age I wanted to do this kind of thing, but I grew up in a very realistic white collar family outside the city of Detroit. And so, you know, it's like the whole notion of doing something creative like this really wasn't, I guess it was actively discouraged. It was fine for a hobby, but not a profession. So I was living in the state of Michigan. I got my undergraduate degree in accounting. I went to law school, specialized in tax. I was on my way to being a tax lawyer, and like 5 months on the job after getting out of law school. And I was like, oh God, I can't do this. This is just not going to work for me. And just seeing other people around me that were, you know, much more enthused about what they were doing professionally than I was, it's like, yeah, I can't do this. And I was lucky in that, you know, between going to a great state school like the University of Michigan and one that was affordable for my parents, I did not leave school with a ton of debt. And so I was able to pivot. If I hadn't had that luxury of not having to pay my own way through school, I never would have been able to do that, because I would have been paying off law school loans for forever. And so I was living in the Twin Cities at the time. I started getting involved with Independent Feature Project North. I don't know if they're still active there or not, the independent film group, and like community like yours, you know, starting to make short films, that kind of thing. Moved to Los Angeles, and then started working in the indie film thing. I produced associate producer on a couple of different films that went to Sundance for Jason Reitman. He probably heard of at this point. He's done very well for himself. And then started doing my own stuff, and then, you know, went around to film festivals in Oregon and other places as well, and sort of got that out there. And the film festival circuit was great. I met a lot of wonderful people, had a lot of really great experiences, got to write off a lot of vacations, which was awesome. But what I soon learned is like sort of that independent voice, independent film. That really is, I'm a much more mainstream creator and sort of my tastes and that kind of thing. And so just, it wasn't sort of my vision of stuff and sort of what the indie community is about, you know, just wasn't going to mesh. You know, I love independent film, but I was not an independent filmmaker. That's probably the best way to put it. And so I was kind of floundering around trying to figure out what to do. I'd done a couple of films that had done reasonably well in the circuit. But the mistake that I had made was making two films that were, quite frankly, very different from each other. You know, one was sort of an action Western, you know, shot in black and white, that Heather, God bless her, helped out tremendously in making and saved us in the middle of the desert. That's a story for later. The other, also shot in the desert, was the first thing that I did, but it was sort of this quiet piece. And so I'd get them in front of agents, and we like your stuff, but we don't know what to do with you, because, you know, what kind of are you? You're not the horror guy, you're not the comedy guy, or whatever. And so, you know, they want things they can sell easily, and I hadn't made their job easy enough for them. So at that point, I had a film that had screened at a festival in Los Angeles, and there, somebody who was in attendance that night, who was at DreamWorks Animation, still is. He's now a senior VP of something or other. And at that point, he was interested in doing a game mod for a game called Half-Life 2, if you're familiar with that game. Yep. And I had not gotten into this at all. I didn't know anything about it. I haven't looked at video games in the longest time. And so he's like, well, get the game, play it a little bit, let's talk, and we'll figure this out. And so I downloaded the game and just got like, wow, this is crazy. This is amazing, the storytelling that's happening in this game. And it got me very interested about possibilities in interactive. And at the same time, I had been working on my sort of personal brand, which was, okay, I had spent a lot of time writing software. And it's like, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of take my filmmaking skills and my tech skills, sort of merge them together and sort of rebrand myself either in visual effects or animation or something like that. And so all this stuff was kind of percolating at the same time. And so I started doing I started doing work in pre-visualization. Spent a lot of these are a lot of sort of short-term gigs where you're figuring out a title sequence, that kind of thing, all doing all this 3D work to sort of figure it out. I mean, now people like Marvel, they previs the entire movie before they shoot it, right? But back in the day, this was kind of a specialty thing where like certain sequences were done this way, heavy visual effects sequences, that kind of thing. And it's all contract work. You're going from job to job. Worked on this horrible film called Food Fight. Find it on iTunes. It's garbage. Everybody that was anybody in visual effects had worked on that film at some point in Hollywood. Made a lot of really great friends there, but it was just horrible. Did a short job at DreamWorks, and then did another job on the Day the Earth Stood Still. I think that was Keanu Reeves was in that. We used to work on the title sequence. Then I went into Turnaround, so we all got fired and we had to move on. And then I had booked a job on the Zack Snyder Watchmen to do previs, and Heather and I got together at that point. We had a kid, we went on vacation, come back, the job is gone because they moved the production to Canada. And so none of us had jobs anymore. And so like, crap, what am I going to do? And that's when I was going through all the ads, and this cinematic director job was open at what was then Midway Games in Chicago, the makers of Mortal Kombat. And so I was like, well, I get this is a way in, right? You're like looking for that break. It was a way in to get that break. And as Heather will tell you, I would never wanted to move back from the West Coast to come back to Chicago, which is where Midway is, where we are now. But it's like, okay, this is a way in. Heather had kind of been itching to leave LA for a bit because it was just kind of crazy. And we had a son at that point, and it made sense to be much closer to family than we were because we're only a few hours away from Heather's mom and things. And so then all came together. Okay, well, I'll apply for this job. And I got it, A, because I knew what I was doing, and B, because I was from the Midwest. They knew I wasn't going to blanch at the first sight of snow and just move back to the West Coast because I couldn't handle it being cold. And so a job that I thought was only going to be, 4 or 5 years, and then we move on because, as you all know, this business is very itinerant. It's now been 15 years and several games later that I've been here. And so I've gone from when I first got hired, we were part of like an insourcing group within the studio where any game that needed cinematics, they came to our group, we made the cinematics and they put them in their games, right? That was kind of the idea, both real time and rendered stuff. Now I work, exclusively on Mortal Kombat and Injustice. As of Mortal Kombat reboot, Mortal Kombat 9, I've been co-writing and now solo writing the games. It's been a really interesting experience to work on something as big. Injustice has been big, but something as iconic as Mortal Kombat. I always forget how big it actually is. I look at some of the viewing numbers on YouTube. It's like, oh wow, millions of people are seeing this. We're not seeing a dime from it, but many people are enjoying this content. So
I think it's worth mentioning too that you were underqualified for this job. Like, had we been in Los Angeles, you never would have qualified to get that job.
That's true. That is an excellent point.
But because it was Chicago, I mean, you had the skills, but you would not have been able to. There would have been many, many, many applicants to that job if it had been anywhere
totally
but
true.
Chicago.
That's totally
at that
true.
time.
Yeah,
but then you stepped into it and you didn't know that there was going to be a writing component. Like the job has morphed since you were there.
Yes.
And talk about the other stuff that you're able to do for them. I'm going to interrupt your bio for you. Because that, you have a business degree and a law degree, which you've chucked because now you do this thing, but you've used those at Midway. or NetherRealm.
Yeah, another realm. Yeah, another realm series. I mean, that is certainly true. I mean, the business end of it. I'm a very producer friendly director. It's like, okay, how much is this? How much is this going to cost? We were just dealing with something today where we thought where our boss had bought into something we thought was going to be fine. Then we put the finished product in front of him. He's like, "What's this decision?" And we're like, "Uh-oh." So it's like, okay, what's the most cost effective way to deal with this decision and get it so that he's happy with minimum fuss and minimum cost of the team. So it's being wary of that and not being too precious with things is really, really important. And certainly my ability to write for these games is largely due to Heather and her friends who took me under their wing, and Heather in particular in terms of just, I'd done writing, I'd read a lot of books and that kind of stuff, but it was working with them and getting real critique for the first time that allowed me to elevate it so that by the time I got to NetherRealm, even though at that point I was still what Heather would call a baby writer, I was still the best one in the room. Because the other people that have been writing for MK at that point didn't have formal training in it, had never been critiqued or workshopped or polished. And so that allowed me to step in. And I've learned a lot since then with the other folks that I've got a chance to work with. And it's, I'm much better than I was 15 years ago.
He got a Writers Guild Award nomination. I have not gotten the Writers Guild Award nomination. I'm just going to put that out there.
Bowen had a question.
I just had a really quick guilty pleasure question. Are you allowed to tell us if Injustice 3 is in the works?
I can't say anything about current.
Oh, is Plastic Man going to be in it? Okay, sorry. Yeah.
I certainly have questions, but I also want to open this up to the floor. But Dominic, maybe you could talk about, since you've worked in film and video games, the parallels in writing for a game versus writing for a film, I'm sure would be pretty interesting. I come from the era, I'm a huge video game nerd. I come from the era where the most extensive story was like just a screen that said something like, the president has been kidnapped by ninjas. Are you a bad enough dude to rescue the president? Press start. And then all of a sudden you're beating guys up. And like, that's all the story that you need. Now, these days, games are as elaborate as feature-length films in terms of story arc and animation. I mean, some like all of the cutscenes or whatnot. When I was at Insomniac, shortly after I left Insomniac, they started working on a Ratchet & Clank video game that paralleled their next Ratchet & Clank game. So you could like play the game and some of those scenes were in the film. So games at this point are now as extensive in terms of storytelling, if not more so, depending on the game, than actual film. So what are some of the parallels between film and video game from the writer's perspective?
I mean, there are certainly many. I mean, you've got to know how to structure a scene. You've got to know how to write quality dialogue. I mean, all that, and particularly in games, there's a tendency I've seen for people to just really overwrite stuff, and it's just that whole axiom of getting in late and getting out early in a scene is really, really important. And that's important to the people that I work for, because they want to give players the break of a scene, but then they want to get the controller back in their hands as quickly as possible. I mean, what we do on MK and Injustice and things is the most similar to traditional narrative. I mean, we do pretty much a straight linear narrative. You get a couple of scenes, you unlock a fight, you win the fight, you unlock the next scene. So we're writing an action movie, basically, with just way more action scenes, because a lot more fights than you would see in a traditional narrative. So that's pretty similar. But then if you look at other games, like Horizon Zero Dawn, that kind of stuff, not only are they telling this linear narrative, but then they have all this environmental storytelling that's happening, whether you're finding a journal or hearing somebody's snippets from something, or just there's storytelling built in the environment. It's the same thing a production designer would do when you're designing space and making it tell the story, but there's more to it because you can explore it, you can pick things up and you can look at them, and there's all this kinds of stuff that's happening. And so there are, and even looking at our case of Mortal Kombat, I'll write or I'll co-write, depending on the situation, a 200-page screenplay for the game, but then that's not the only storytelling in the game. We're also writing 1-minute monologues of what happens next if a player playing as a particular character beats the boss of the game in a different mode of the game. We're writing intro conversations that happen when the players select who they're going to fight as, and then they select who their fighters are going to be, and then they yak at each other. Yeah, you suck, fight. It's got to be better than that. And more interesting. So there's tens of thousands of lines of dialogue in addition to what's in the screenplay that have to express character and be interesting enough that people are going to want to screen cap them and put them on YouTube and pass them around. So there's a lot of there's just more of it. You got to be good at it. There's more.
I didn't realize you guys also wrote the intro dialogues. Which one are your guys' favorite? Which is your personal favorite, if you have one?
I mean, the funny characters are always the most fun because you can have the most play with it. Johnny Cage, it's just watching him try to hit on women and get slapped in the face is great. It's a lot of fun. And then writing the Joker was really always interesting because he's just got this malevolence to him and that kind of thing. But I have to say, it was really, this is surprising, but in MK11, one of the most interesting characters to write was Rambo.
I was literally just watching intro dialogues from Rambo today, and I thought it was really cool how you have all of these like outlandish characters by comparison that are saying like fate of the universe and everything, but Rambo is kind of like still, despite all of his skill sets, kind of a man out of his element. So it was cool to see kind of like his kind of
very much
laid backness with it to it.
Yeah. Well, it was also really important to me, and of course, our license only extended to certain films in the canon, but things kind of went off the rails after the first movie. There's a lot of interesting character stuff going on in that first Rambo, in addition to all the action that's there, and that was my hook into him. I was like, okay, there is meat here. Let's try to explore that as Rambo's personality and exploring that not only through his dialogue but through his latter ending, which I thought came off really well. So they were writing that, and then additionally we have a second sort of meta layer of it with a character like Rambo, where Stallone's going to do the voice, so I got to get him in the booth, and we're going to have to do all this, and then we try to put in like little Easter eggs, like I'll work his movie titles into the dialogue, that kind of stuff, which is fun. And so I'm sort of sweating all the writing on this because nobody's lived Rambo over the last 30 years than Sylvester Stallone. And it's like, okay, I got to get the script to him ahead of time because he's probably going to have notes, and and I don't want to screw this up because he's going to be very particular and he could beat me up, even though it's in the 70s. And so we didn't get any notes on the script, and then we're getting into the session, and he's a little cranky to start because a little bit early, and then he got into the flow and he was fine. But then as he's sort of hitting the Easter eggs, and he remembers his films and stuff, and he's hitting his stuff, and he's just chuckling as we're recording the dialogue. And I was like, okay, I did it. I got it. That was good.
It's like the Jax line. You got a gift for demolition, man.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that is one of them. So it's always a challenge. But
Also,
we've exhausted so much pop culture in that last game. I'm not sure what I'm going to do for the next one.
So Lori has a question in the chat. Lori is asking, is it difficult to incorporate catchphrases for characters without being too cliche or too over the top?
With a game like MK, it's hard to be too over the top.
True.
I mean, and then
There's a lot of tropes there.
Yeah, it's but it's sort of like Scorpion has to say "get over here" at some point,
right?
He just has to, and so there are other things like that you just have to include, and you find that one spot to put it in, get the reference in, and move on because you don't want to belabor it. So the key is just not to do it too much, I think.
Yeah, and with a video game that's been going on since the 90s, how do you find yourself reinventing the wheel? How do you keep it fresh?
I mean, it's a lot of it has to do with my boss, Ed Boon, the co-creator of Mortal Kombat. He, as we approach each story, he's got some kind of a nugget in his head of where he wants the game to go from a gameplay perspective as well as narratively. And it's a matter of trying to tease out what he's looking for and turn that into a larger narrative. And sometimes that's easy, and he sort of he picks the idea like, oh yeah, that's it, let's go. And other times it's like, yeah, we got these 3 pitches in front of him, and it's like menu at a restaurant. Like, I want this thing from A, I want this thing from B, I got this thing from C. And sometimes you look at them at first and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. These don't go together. And then you spend enough time on it, you figure it out, and then eventually it feels like it was all planned from the beginning that way. So
nice.
Hang on.
Well, I'm always impressed with how video games I play now. I'm still never, how do I phrase this? I am always so impressed with how I'm able to go over and interact with just about anything. From a coding perspective, it blows my mind every single time. So, I mean, that's got to be really huge, the
Yeah.
technology.
I want to mention.
Yeah, those are very
upgrades.
smart people that are doing that
Yeah.
for sure.
John, Wayne, or Cassidy, since you three haven't had a chance to ask anything yet, you have questions for Heather or Dom?
John had a question for me earlier. I wanted to get back to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
John, question for you. So you asked me about pitching when I was pitching to Stargate. Did you mean Stargate specific or pitching TV shows in general?
John may have stepped away or is
John may have
muted.
stepped away.
or you're muted, John. But that's a great topic to dig into, of maybe the art of the pitch. Maybe you could talk about that.
That's like classes. There are classes about that. If I was going to ask if it was Stargate specific or TV specific, I would say that world doesn't exist anymore because of the way TV is structured. It used to be that shows were required to hire a certain number of freelancers every year by the guild. Like you would have to give, I think it was 2 episodes to a freelancer or a freelance team and not have it written by someone who was on staff. It was a little bit more open. So for instance, like I got an agent through this contest and they send your stuff around. So once you get an agent, it's easier to get in the door to pitch to places. But that's the requirement. The only thing that was not, that didn't follow that requirement was when Star Trek was on. So you had Star Trek Next Generation, and then you had Deep Space Nine and Voyager. And I had started out, even when I was a senior in college, I got invited to pitch to Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And then I think I went back a total of 8 times, I want to say. Never sold a darn thing. But it was great to do it. But they were the only ones even then who were accepting pitches from people who were not represented, who were not agented writers. No one does that anymore. So it's a matter of getting places to read your script, and that comes with having an agent. And those are huge. There's like, I've taught those classes, you know what I mean? Like, it's a semester of getting it together. There's something called an elevator pitch, which I'm sure most people are familiar with. At any point, and this is true, like networking, this is true. Like I said, I do a lot of work with the Mystery Writers of America and Sisters in Crime. So I'm deep in the mystery community right now, and kind of learning my way in that genre. So I'm the chronic volunteer. I think we're all probably fitting that mode, being here with this organization. And you get the opportunity, the more people you meet, they will turn to you at some point and say, and what are you working on? And or what have you done? And you really need to be able to say off the cuff, it's the story about a girl who walks through the Stargate, who learns, everyone in her town learns through nanites. That's the bad version of learning curve, but because I didn't know I had to practice for tonight. But you need to, because people want to be in general helpful. If you prove that you are someone who's great to work with, if you are cheerful in general, if you are helpful, people love to help. But you really can't come up and say, hey, I want you to help me. Because that's kind of opportunistic. Yeah. My suggestion is always, and this has not changed, we're not physically in Hollywood anymore, or even like career-wise in Hollywood anymore, but everywhere I've gone in any industry, it's always ask for advice. Like, prove yourself that you're worthy of someone else's time. So you're not like a dilettante or too good to do, like, go get everyone lunch on time, as happened with on one of Dominic's shoots, where I had to fire someone in the middle of, what was it, Del Taco, because he decided to run an errand before he went and picked up the crew lunch. And time is literally money.
Yep. Literally
thousands, millions going out the door. That's why all those actors, like, they're the stories, like, I had the worst stomach flu, but I got up and I did the scene, because you cannot, it's a runaway train. Production does not stop. But if you're someone who will just do it and not complain about it, and you have good ideas, but you know when to keep your mouth shut and you're
Very
discreet.
key.
People will take an interest in that, and you're a hard worker because they like to help people. So if you then say, I would love to get your advice or pick your brain, those opportunities happen. What you don't want to have happen is what happened to me when I was working on Pacific Blue. My boss, Don Marcus, who is the sweetest, most amazing person, he took me out to lunch and he said, you know, you've done good work here. I want to send your stuff to my agent. What have you written? And I had been in LA for, I think, 2.5 or 3 years by that point, I think. And I said, I was embarrassed because I didn't have any finished scripts. That's also a raging case of ADD that went undiagnosed for decades. So I have perspective on that now, but it was very embarrassing. So if you're going to be a writer, you got to write. And that's true even now. But the people are out there who will help you, and personal recommendations will always be the coin of the realm. So if someone enjoys working with you, others will hear about it, and the opportunities will come your way in that way.
Wayne and Cassie, do you two have a question you want to throw out there?
I have one for Heather. You mentioned character writing. Is that you're writing for a specific character and working as a team where other people are writing for other characters? Or?
That can happen on shows. That was another piece of advice I heard once. Like when you get on staff of a TV show, particularly a comedy. This is fairly true even now. On Stargate, there wasn't a writer's room per se. Writer's rooms tend to be more for comedies, situation comedies, because those are kind of like work together as a group and then someone is assigned credit. You're kind of credit on rotation. Dramas, which is anything that's basically an hour, you might break stories in the room, you might outline them in the room, but then you're going off and writing on your own for a week or two. It used to be a full 3 and then it was down to 2. And by the time I left, it was like you were lucky if you got a week. And the script that I was writing on Glory Days when we got canceled is called Gangbang, where we were at the office for 36 hours straight trying to write this script, ironically called Dead Air. And then the day after we turned it in, we got canceled. So that was Valentine's Day that year. That was bad show, but production does not stop.
Yep.
So to answer your question about character writing, one of the things that they recommend is be the person who writes the storylines for the characters no one else wants to write for, because that makes you invaluable as part of a staff if you can really get that voice. When I say character writers, what I meant more was we were like straight drama. We were like your Once and Again, your soap opera-y, Dawson's Creek type of writers. Those were what our credits were in or what our interests were in. I think I'd written a West Wing at that point to get on that show that had gotten me in the door. Obviously I had credits, but you're also writing spec scripts. So spec scripts are an episode of an existing show that will never be produced, but that if you read it, it reads like an episode that just never aired. And so none of us had written something called procedurals, which is what your murder mystery shows are. So what are some examples? There's so many out there, all the CBS shows like Blacklist.
Every single CSI show you from every city in the country has its own CSI at this point.
All the CSIs, if it's a doctor show or a law show, it's a procedural. The Good Wife was a character-driven procedural. Those are kind of like murder mysteries, honestly. So, but when we were coming out of the drama world, it was a very specific genre. To Dominic's point, where he was saying like no one knew what to do with him. Back then too, you had to choose comedy or drama. You could not play in both worlds. Dramedy was kind of a newer genre then, with Ally McBeal, I think was a dramedy. That was very new back then. Now it's much more, there's a lot more of the comedy drama crossover. And I know plenty of comedy writers who are now drama writers and vice versa. There's a lot more movement, but back then, not so much.
You had 3 networks, right?
Well, we had 5. And then, but we also had basic cable, or, cable, USA. And what's really fascinating, if you want to read more about it, I wish there was just one book but the revolution was televised. I think that's the name of it. I'll have to look at it for it. But just talks about the impact of platform on the content of television programs. I actually, I taught a TV class at DePaul that basically I morphed it into the history of television through the decades, and how like we went from I Love Lucy and that platform, which was ad-based, to the current streaming situation where it's all independent. So at the time that I was working in television, we were only going from standalone episodes, and you can see this on Stargate, just over the course of the seasons from 1 to 7. It's much more episodic in the beginning of that show than you have by the end. There weren't multi-arc storylines, there weren't multi-episode storylines, because TiVo was new. TiVo came out in, I think it was 99. I was one of the first people to have it. It revolutionized my life. And now, of course, we can't live without it, right? I mean, you don't even have to record TV is weird. You just turn it on, and that has, now everything is meant to be watched as a binge.
Yeah, I was gonna ask a question about that, because there's a really good Sarah Zed video detailing how people consume media. Like I Know Who Shot JR, we can't really have that anymore because everything is so bingeable. And like, what is that from a writer's standpoint? How do you feel as this?
It's fascinating. I can see that it's much more like we're reading novels now. It's like televised novels. So like when we sit down to watch a show, even in, like we're the TV writing professionals in our house. So we take our television writing very seriously. When we sit down to watch something, we know that whatever we're seeing in the first episode is going to pay off in the 8th episode. Like they have to really think about this as, you know, you have the typical, TV used to be 4-act structure. So you'd have act 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we got into 5 acts. So like the WB shows, Buffy was a 5-act show. I think Glory Days might have been a 5-act show. And there are very specific posts within each of those. By like at the end of act 1, something happens, and at the end of act 2, something happens before the commercials. And then when Buffy moved to UPN, so it moved from WB to UPN. Those are the two like outsider networks where the content was like kind of for the kids. They went to a 6-act structure, and this is all to make more room for the advertising. This had nothing to do with the content, but it really upset the kind of the rhythm of the show. It was noticeable how different the show felt at that time. Now we have the CW and their branding networks. So I definitely have like a 1-hour 4-act mindset. If you're working in film, it's more of a 3-act mindset, but they're 4 acts because that second act is, if you've taken a screenwriting class, it's like 30 pages, 60 in the middle. Though now it's more, you have more of a 90-page script. 120 is too long for scripts these days. Knowing that act structure really is helpful. We internalize it, we recognize it because we've been raised on the structure. It's really inherent to how we consume media and how we know what's going on. So we're going to see that in every individual episode that we see. So what have we watched recently that we've liked? What have we watched recently that we've liked?
Well, we watched The Bear last night. That was pretty intense.
The Bear, but I haven't seen the end of it yet.
Yeah,
so
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. But you're going to find that within the episode, but then everything, the whole arc of the season. So it used to have to be, you would do 22 to 24 episodes a season. And that was a long time to have to sustain, like over a year. And you had to make sure that you recapped, because people didn't want to pick up a story in the middle because they weren't going to be able to see the beginning of it. Now you can come back in on a show in season 5 and go back and watch from season 1 and catch yourself up. That's unprecedented, that our kids and even my students, this was 10 years ago, I started teaching at DePaul, and I assigned a Netflix, like you had to have a Netflix account, but I also put up a whole lot of television on our server for them. And this is a thing because it sucked to watch it there. And then not like 3 or 4 years later, it was like, get an Amazon Prime account and get a Netflix account, and we're going to watch Hill Street Blues, and we're going to watch Cagney and Lacey, and we're going to have, like, our daughter binged all of MASH, which was
Yes.
on when I was
MASH.
her age.
Frasier.
And- Yeah,
Cheers.
Frasier, Cheers. She's watching the media we grew up with. Kids are listening to, she's listening to the Beatles. She's listening, you know, they're discovering all this stuff from our generation and our parents' generation. That is unprecedented. No society in humanity has had that level of access to the media that the prior generation grew up with. So that's why it was interesting, because Stranger Things came out when I was teaching that class. It was clear why people who are Gen X like that show, because we, you know, that was childhood. That's kind of like what it looked like.
Yeah.
But the 20 somethings, like the older teens and 20 somethings, I'm like, what is it about this show that you like so much? Why are you responding to this? And I don't even remember what the answer was, but like that intergenerational bonding that used to have to take place on like TGI Friday, that night where like they had the
Yeah.
sitcoms and you would sit around as a family. It kind of happens around these, like Squid Game was another one.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you bring that up, because Stranger Things is a show I enjoy watching with my parents.
Mhm.
Like having that kind of media that multiple generations can watch and relate to, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's interesting too how influential it is now. Like as of a month ago, suddenly every teen and 20 something's favorite artist is Kate Bush, whereas 2 months ago,
Yeah.
none of them had any idea who Kate Bush was.
So true.
And now
I even
suddenly-
had to look that up.
Good.
But that's the thing. It's like so I've heard Kate Bush, like I went back and I'm like, I know that song. I know I heard
Yeah.
that song. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, that song. But that was when we had radio, right? So you were gonna hear something on the radio because that's what you were playing if you were in your car, because we didn't have the cassettes, we didn't have the
Yeah.
DVD players, you didn't have Spotify. Now we have that, so I could go on and I could pull down the Kate Bush album myself. Metallica is now huge. It's like, oh,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah, it's amazing how much influence one popular show can have on. I mean, we're sitting in a record store right now, and I'm sure as soon as Stranger Things came out, whatever copies of Kate Bush albums were on the shelf were gone in an instant.
no, they
So-
were. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but
They distracted. I mean, and TV used to be that way. 21, going back to 21 Jump Street, that's how I learned about Steve Winwood. Now, if you watch the reruns, they didn't have the license for any of that music. So they had to they have really bad music on there now. But Steve Winwood, I remember all the bands of the 80s had an episode which featured the music from one band, like up and coming band. U2 was featured one
wow.
season. Like I can remember the music that was playing behind a lot of these different episodes. These were newer other artists, and even on Glory Days, like they have music supervisors who go out and it's like, what are people listening to now? What do we want to put out there? With vertical integration, which is like the corporations own the studios, so it's all, you know, like if you boycotted Disney, you had to turn off Hulu, you had to drop the Disney Channel, you had to turn off ESPN. There's so much.
Everything.
Yeah, in
Mhm.
breeding. Yes, it's a
It
great-
was
great word.
it was early to mid 2000s when suddenly terrestrial radio was no longer the influence. And I was working at record labels at the time in LA. I worked for Capitol Records, Interscope, Universal, and
Mhm.
MySpace Records for a while. And there was a certain point in the early 2000s where all of a sudden we cared more about licensing songs for commercials and TV shows than we did about radio. And
Right.
the most important
Mm.
thing was if you got like one of our songs of a new artist tagged as the song on the next, I don't know, Nissan car commercial, the single most important thing for sales was making sure that in the commercial it tagged saying artist and song name in the
Mhm.
commercial, or at the end of a show, like Gilmore Girls
Mhm.
or Dawson or something like that, where they would list off specifically all the featured artists in the show. That's when that seismic shift started to happen. And
Yes.
now with things like, I mean, the most random things can become massive hits off of just becoming viral on TikTok. You know, all of a sudden, like a year ago, sea shanties were suddenly like super in for no random reason other than TikTok a couple of people made TikTok videos with sea shanties. Suddenly everyone was all about like these old pirate, yo-ho songs, it's so weird how that influence now, whereas the traditional steps, I mean, radio still exists, but its influence in terms of defining hits now is almost non-existent compared to one random song ending up on a popular TV show like Stranger Things. And suddenly that's all anyone wants to listen to now is Kate Bush.
The mimetic. I was reading an interview with Rick Astley the other day, and he was talking about how his kids had to explain to him what Rick rolling was. It's like, no, really, Dad. It was just hysterical.
And that's the joy. I think that's the joyfulness of it, where it's more organic. Because even Stranger Things admits they didn't put that Kate Bush song in there to make her a bestseller.
Right.
30 years later, they
just randomly picked a song.
They randomly picked an 80s song that was cheap. Because let's be honest, anytime you use music in anything, you're paying for that. And if it's a big artist, you're paying through the nose. So that's why a lot of TV shows will have crappy music, or really old music. That's I Only Have Eyes for You. Isn't that, which is the song that we've been hearing across every single...
Yeah,
Running Up That Hill.
No. It's older. It's
no, it's a 1950s doo-wop song that you're talking about. That was
that one.
I've heard it like 3 different TV shows.
I think it's
like
Penguin.
That's a cheap song.
Yeah.
We needed an old song. This one's cheap.
You said how much this stuff costs. Like when in Mortal Kombat 11, the guy that's the voice of Baraka, Steve Bloom, he likes to riff. He's an incredibly funny guy. And I forgot there was something I had said, and all of a sudden in the Baraka voice, and Baraka's this character with big teeth, he talks like this, kind of thing. And he starts doing Rick James's Super Freak in the Baraka voice. And it's hysterical. It's like, oh my God, save this. We're going to do this. I wrote this intro with Johnny Cage where Baraka's lost a bet and he has to sing Super Freak. And it was hysterical. And then it went to legal and they're like, yeah, Rick James needs $5,000. Put that in. And we're like,
Dom, I'm
really like, all right. That's a bummer.
I'm really glad you brought that up because it was something I was going to ask you about. I remember when I was at Insomniac Games, we would, whenever we were working on a game and we were to the point of recording dialogue, and for those who don't know, it's pages upon pages of random phrases that these voice actors have to say over and over again, every single line in the film they're recording time and time again. So inevitably there's flubs. And there'd be certain things like one of the Resistance games I worked on, it was supposed to be seize the beacon, and the guy accidentally said seize the bacon. And suddenly that became like our anthem around the office was every time that like our testing team was going through stuff, like, seize the bacon, go for the bacon. Or, he's one voice actor I remember randomly went off about it just started going off on a rant like, oh, this is so stupid. Yeah, go over and guard the little blade of grass on the hill. Like, what are we even talking about here? What are some like all-time behind the scenes Mortal Kombat flubs that are, from the voice acting side that have kind of become part of the Midway lexicon?
I mean, we don't have a ton of flubs, honestly. It's usually kind of jokes that sort of end up in it. So we don't have things that are like that. And certainly now the game has evolved, in terms of like sort of preserving what the Mortal Kombat world is. We don't throw in a lot of sort of rando, like weird things into the dialogue. They don't usually end up there. What ends up coming, there's a lot of visual gags that happen. And then there are like, as people start to play the game internally and they start hearing all the intros, they start having their favorite lines. And like those lines will become, something in the studio. I had one of my colleagues who's no longer at the studio. There was a couple games ago, she had her favorite phrases in the story and she made buttons of all of them. And so we had little button phrases for all of her lines that she liked. So that's the kind of stuff that gets in. Our improv folks are the ones that tend to be the funniest in terms of doing stuff. But we've talked about wanting to do like Pixar style outtakes, but nobody wants to spend the money to do it because it would not be cheap to make mistakes.
We had
money to do that for like 5 games.
We had a late arrival, so you want to introduce yourself and what you do?
My name is Isaac Woodwick, and I work with Nick Alexander Films as a project manager. So this is yeah, this is kind of a fun thing. I see a couple of our actors here as well, which is really cool. But yeah, that's
Brooks
kinda
up there
what I
too.
do and how I'm connected with Klamath Film.
Thanks for being here, Isaac. So since you came in late, we're talking to Heather Ash and Dominic. I can never say the last name correctly.
It's
Is
okay.
it-
The shibboleth.
Cianciolo.
Thank you.
Cianciolo.
I feel your pain on that. Lidkey is my last name. I've heard every variation imaginable. But Dominic's worked extensively in video games, obviously, and Heather has been a screenwriter for TV and film extensively. So since you came in, I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to talk. So did you have any questions specifically for our guests?
Oh man, not right off the bat, but it's fascinating, hearing what you guys are saying about just like the current culture and how different things are grabbing people's attention. I think that's really fascinating.
And
I have a
Cassidy,
question.
yeah, well, I was going to say, Cassidy, this is family. Hey, you haven't had a chance to chime in yet. So
I know
Yeah.
it's been really fun hearing about all this, and there's so many things that I want to jump in and say, but I'm not going to commandeer the meeting with family. But so I do have two separate questions for Dom and Heather, and then I have a joint question. So I'll get into that later. But so Heather, I am so curious if there's anything that you could like share with us, like for storytelling resources or tools that you really enjoy, because I know there's people here, myself included, who would love to be a good writer. And see, book list recommendations. I could send it out to our Klamath Film members and stuff.
I will send it to you.
Okay.
This is just what I pulled off my shelf. Again, because I do this. We can't share screens, can we? I don't think we-
let me see if I can.
We can give you permission.
Yeah. Who can share? Can start sharing. Yeah. It's set up. You can
Oh,
share
I see
share
it.
your screen.
Okay, before I share my screen now, this is, I will send that. Cassie will remind me, and then I will take a week to do the thing. It's just like my bio. This is one of the best books that's really basic, but really helpful. It's well worn. I've book-eared it, dog-eared it. Writing Movies, Gotham Writers Workshop. I reread this every so often. It's a good reminder because scripts are very specific. We can get away with a lot when we're writing short stories or novels, which is what makes it so frightening to me personally, because I learned to write screenplays. I learned to write with fan fiction. I learned like dialogue. Film and TV, you cannot write anything on the page that cannot be seen or heard. That's basically the rule. And there are formatting rules that are very specific. So if you send a script to someone that's not formatted properly, it goes in the garbage. If you send it out with typos, it goes in the garbage. Some colleges would not let me fail people who did not spell check their screenplays. That's okay. When they get to the professional world, they will fail. It's a pet peeve, it's a bugaboo. But when you master that format, it's also very freeing for certain people. Certain people hate it and find it very restrictive. I actually really like the 4-act structure. I like hearing the character voices in my head. So this is good for both like TV and original screenplay writing. I highly recommend that one. This is the one that everyone hears about, Save the Cat. Don't be one of the writers who's a creative executive. So there's a joke that the creative executives at studios and networks, they read all the screenwriting books, but they have no idea what the hell they're talking about. So they're like, "Where's your first act turn?" And it's like, oh, dudes. People will go to Save the Cat, which is basically what it breaks down is a lot of the genre expectations. If you're going to write, for instance, a murder mystery, someone actually has to get murdered. And then there has to be mystery. And so it's like the expectations for different types of genres. So for instance, like Monster in the House is one of the forms. And so anything that you watch, when you know what the genre is, if it's a romantic comedy, if it's a mystery, if it's, what else? What else we have? Horror movie. There are certain scenes you're going to expect to see. You have to know what those are, because if you leave them out, and I've been in a couple of writing groups and in instructional groups where people who don't understand that, it's really interesting. Because again, you kind of absorb it, but when it's not there, you notice that it's gone. And so it's like a requirement. This will give you kind of that understanding, but don't follow it like verbatim. And then if you want to write for TV, Pamela Douglas has writing the TV drama series. There's probably an updated edition of this one. And then the comedy version, I like this one, is TV Writer's Workbook from one of the Murphy Brown writers. She was on Murphy Brown and Wings, I think. So these are both good because comedy has two different types of scripts. There's the multi-camera comedy and the single camera comedy. And they both have absolutely different expectations and formats. Drama at least has one. So there's that. And then The Art of Plotting by Linda Cowgirl, which is really good because character is plot and plot is character. You cannot divorce them.
So
And
true.
this is really good to kind of put that out there so that you see it a little bit more. So there's that. And then go online. Let me do this. I'm going to share my screen. I hope my son reminded me that this is also a skill. Can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
I see all you guys in my other thing. Okay, so you have two Stargate scripts here. These are genuine article. On the left here was the writer's draft of my episode Foothold, which is the best one that I wrote. Don't watch the other ones. This one is really good. You see that there's a production number. You see that there's this language that says you can't sell this, it's ours. And then you're going to see, this is the script format. Most of them are going to be in Courier, and this is important. We wrote in Times New York, Times New York. Format and font, Courier 12, you have to put it in that font because in film and TV, 1 page is 1 minute. If you do any other font, you're going to throw off the timing. So it's not allowed. And I got yelled at by my own friends because I would send them drafts in something else. And they're like, this is supposed to be in Courier. You're also going to see up here that there's a date. And then over here on the right, if you can see that one, you see that there are other dates here. So these were rewrites.
Mhm.
And when we rewrite a script in production, we issue color pages. Now this is all done on computer too, but these were literal pages that go from in order. So the final draft is the final draft that we send out to production. This writer's draft over here, this doesn't necessarily look a lot like what the final Foothold was, but there's enough. And then you'll see that over here we have scene numbers. We have, trying to get to the page that's the same. Even these pages are different. You have pink pages up here because it was literally a pink page, but if it got Xeroxed onto white, you would need to know that. You see that the dates are different here. So hopefully all that makes sense. Actually, I think I imported this into something because the date's off.
In terms, Heather, in terms of software that pre-renders structure for script writing these days, so with the film camp, I use Keltex to teach.
Oh, that's old, yeah.
To teach kids. What's kind of more of a common type of format or software that people can use that will auto format things for a script?
So industry standard is Final Draft.
Okay.
This
That's what we
actually
use.
I wrote in Movie Magic, which was the contender, and that was fine because most of our scripts were going out as PDF anyway, or they were being Stargate used Movie Magic, and after that it's whatever production you're on, you'll use their software. Those are the two that are known. Final Draft actually is much more well known now, and it's updated for the new operating systems. So if you're a student, I think you can get a version for $100, and that gives you, I think, 3 different licenses, so you can put it on multiple computers. That's fine. Like, don't use anything else. If you can afford it, like, don't go buy it if you're never going to use it again. That's where things like Keltex, I think that's really the only other one that's out there, because that's website based, right?
Yes, yeah, it's
Yeah.
web-based. We have a partnership with the Southern Oregon University Digital Cinema Program, and
Mhm.
through them, they provide a license for our film camp to use.
Oh, perfect.
So it just makes sense if that's what they teach, that's what we end up using. But I'm just curious if there's something that's more industry standard. I've heard Movie Magic talked about a lot. I haven't heard a lot about Final Draft.
I don't think Movie Magic is even making screenwriting software.
No, they
anymore. I
are.
think they
but
are they?
Oh, they totally are. But the issue was they
Huh.
didn't update it. So
I've heard
actually had to
I've
go
heard a
over
lot
to
of
Final Draft.
gripes about Movie Magic. I should say.
I was one of them, and
Yeah.
I was loyal for years and years and years. But there was an update that was supposed to come while with Mac Mac that never came. So Final Draft really has always been the go-to, and that's the one a lot of the film schools use. Once you get it, then your updates are going to be free, and then that will also play nicely if you have to export it somewhere. But again, if you're working on a production, you don't have to worry about that so much. Most people aren't printing scripts anymore. They're sending them, they're making PDFs and emailing them, which is how I do it. I wanted to show this to you guys though, what a production draft looks like, because when you go on the internet, which is a great place to look for scripts, because you should read all the scripts. You should also put the closed captions on your televisions, because there's something to seeing the words pop up on the screen, even though they won't always be the exact same ones. I think it kind of programs your brain to see dialogue as words, even if it's not in the same format. So if I go on to, let me back up on this one. What I did is I went on to Google and I said, Stargate SG-1 foothold script. And these are the choices. There's a difference when you're looking at scripts online between actual production scripts and transcripts. So this actually says transcript, but this is someone has taken and watched the episode and it looks kind of like a script, and sometimes they'll even format it as if it is a script, like with separate pages, but this is not what I wrote. And if you went back to the other pages, you would see that this, especially this description, and we don't ever put anything in brackets. We don't put description in brackets. So this is clearly someone who has just transcribed the episode. It's not bad if you're just looking at dialogue, but it's not accurate if you're also looking at those elements of description, which are really important to have, because you'll notice there is a lot of white space on the page. And that's another mark of a script. Yes, there's a lot of white space, but this is formatted like a play, like a stage play. And it's a very, very, very different animal. So I like to go online. I tried my experiment tonight. There are scripts out there so much now with the internet. I just tend to kind of squirrel them away when I get access to them. Like I'm still a Writers Guild member, so they send scripts and they send DVDs every year for judging. But like the Handmaid's Tale pilot, this is scriptpdf.com. I found it. Just be careful. Like don't, make sure that the links are not going to pirate things. But if you click on it, read the script now, you're getting these actual scripts and you're getting early drafts like this writer's draft. A writer's draft is the very first one the writer writes and will send out. And it's always worth it to read the writer's draft and then compare it with the finished episode. Because a lot of times you're going to find differences, you're going to find cut scenes, you're going to get insight in how they describe things that you may not really pick up on from the episode itself.
That's so fun. Heather, I do something very similar where I just Google the ending at the very intense part of the movie. So I'm sure you guys would really suggest that I do that.
Do I suggest that you do that? No, I suggest you watch it.
Watch it. Yes.
I know. Well, my joint question for y'all was what TV recommendations you have recently, because I love the critiques the critiques that you have on like Facebook and stuff. And I literally am not a critique person at all. I'm always so fascinated by how you can actually I'm like, oh, I loved it, or oh, it was too scary. Those are like my two different critiques for things. So
we're really hard. We learned, because when you're in LA and you're working the business, like everyone talks like this. It's any industry, like mystery writers are all, I have a book club with 3 mystery writers and then our civilian, and she just sits back a lot of times because we start analyzing things. It's you learn like whatever it is that you do, and we've done this for 20 something ish years now. You internalize so much that you don't realize. Our kids, we joke, have had a film school education for free because they live with us. And we will stop it and go, so how do you know who this character is in the first scene? What have they done to show you who this character is? Tell us, give us 5 things. Like be more aware of what you're watching. And it's interesting to watch too, because Dominic is director. I am not a director. I don't want to be a director. He will pick up on the elements in the background and the weather and all these visual things and the movement and blocking that I don't see.
Yeah.
And he automatically does it.
What do the other characters say about your character? That's
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, so much, the good writing is seamless, but it's also organic. I turned to him the other night and I said, so notice that they've said, remember when, like 3 times in this episode. That's lazy writing. That's one of the tropes of, I have to get out this exposition. So let's talk about something you already know.
Was that Stranger Things? I didn't remember what we were watching. What was that?
I don't think it was Stranger Things, but we were frustrated. So we just finished Stranger Things.
Yeah.
The number one trope that I always point out
Oh my
to
God.
students is if within the first 5 to 10 minutes of a film or a TV show, one character says, as you know, ... It's like, okay, immediate, check mark as bad, lazy, terrible writing. If
Yeah.
everyone in the room already knows, why are you reiterating something that everyone
Right.
knows? It's just very lazy exposition
Yeah.
into explaining to the audience exactly what's going on. If I hear those words, as you know, or as you may already know, it's like, okay, this thing's like dead
Yeah.
to me from this point forward.
Well, that's why remember, what was it?
Remember, it was For All Mankind, wasn't it?
Yes, For All Mankind, which is a
Which
show
is
that
falling
is
off a cliff.
1 and 2. 1 was fantastic. 2 is questionable. but
Yeah,
good. And 3 is just, we've given up.
I'm making my way through season 3 now, and it's not.
Stop.
I
Stop. Just
loved
stop.
season 1 though. I loved season
I
1 so
know.
much.
Spare yourself the pain because it's not
Yes.
worth it. Yeah, but The Boys I am
is-
not, if you were Cassidy, don't watch this one, but it is freaking, you wouldn't appreciate it and then you'll be mad at me. It is the most disgusting, vile, offensive show. It is not a show I should even like. I think Dominic was like, you're not gonna like
I
this.
didn't think she was gonna like it. It's like,
No, you didn't.
Nice.
I
No.
have something again. I do not do graphic gore. I
yeah,
can't.
she can't watch
I-
Mortal Kombat cinematics, so it's like,
No,
yeah,
I
you're not
can't.
gonna like
I was
The
like,
Boys.
it's
no,
nice, honey.
forget it.
Just no. The Boys is very Mortal Kombat-esque. It is disgusting. You will never look at sea creatures in the same way again. But genius, brilliant. It actually, one of the episodes got a writer, scratch that. It has been nominated for Writers Guild. Mystery Writers of America has a TV episode award, and one of them got nominated for that. The only criteria for a Mystery Writers Award is a crime has to be committed. So people question like the cross genre. Well, it's sci-fi. It's like, I can tell you that the Wildlife Protection Act was broken at least 5 times in this particular episode. Therefore, that crime alone qualifies it, much less the 18 others that happen in Act 1. So it's in there.
Have you guys watched Invincible?
Yes. Yes. Invincible, the first season of Invincible is very good.
We
Oh,
have
wow.
about 10 minutes left. I know time flies when we're having fun, right? And I always want to make sure that everyone who is joining us gets a chance to have one final question, one final comment in with our guests. So if we could just go around. Isaac, since you joined late, why don't you kick us off if you have any questions or anything you want to say? I know you missed the first part of our conversation, but any last opportunity to kind of chime in with Heather or Dominic, or just general comments about the conversation? I know, Bowen, you have like 100 questions. I'm sorry. We ran out of time. Yeah.
It has grown by the second, but
Yeah.
Heather, when you're writing, what do you do to keep like focus if you find yourself like drifting off? Or like-
Adderall.
There you go.
It's interesting. I wasn't totally kidding, but Adderall doesn't really work like that for me. Here is what I have learned about myself, and I'm still learning this, and all writers I know are still learning this. If I can get into the groove, I have to write the shittiest first draft of all time. I am a great rewriter. I'm phenomenal at rewriting. I'm phenomenal at notes. I'm phenomenal at fixing things. The first draft is like pulling teeth. I would actually rather pull out my own teeth than write one. However, if I give it like a couple hours, because I kind of have to gear up and kind of get into the mindset, I can surprise myself and kind of let the characters talk. I'm a great mimic too. So that's what was hard for moving from TV writing to like film writing and original material writing is I don't have someone's voice to channel because I'm really good at mimicking other people's voices.
Yeah, Heather's spec scripts are chef's
Thank you.
kisses. You're welcome. Yeah, she
but-
can nail the voice of a show like nobody's business.
Yeah, it's if I like a show, I can tell when it's, and being off show even slightly will make me crazy. But it helps to have also beta readers, a writers group. I had a phenomenal writers group when I lived in LA still. We're still friends. That really helped elevate my writing and get my writing done, is because I had an outside deadline and I had people keeping me on track, and they were all incredibly talented. A lot of them went on to writing professionally as well. And now still too, like trying to find those people whose opinions are good. Dominic reads everything I write, even my emails sometimes, because he's really good at story, but he sucks at proofreading. So I got to give that to someone else. But he'll come to me too with stuff occasionally, but it's mostly work stuff. So I'm not as good with that. You just have to keep doing it and find someone to kind of keep you accountable.
Terrific. Lori, do you have a last question or final comment?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate both of you talking. It's been really interesting to listen. I guess one last question I would maybe have would be, I think Heather, you had, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but you had mentioned that to be the writer that nobody else wants to write for, and I maybe missed if you were talking about a specific character or a genre.
Yeah, it was.
Do you remember that thought? Okay.
I do remember that thought. Strangely, this is making me feel so good about myself. No, if you're on staff on a show, especially staffs with large casts, if there's always going to be some appreciated character, or someone whose voice is a little harder to nail, or they just don't have a lot to do. I'll use a Stargate example, for instance. Chris Judge, who played Teal'c. When I was on staff, it was third season in the run, and there's not a lot to do with kind of a monoverbal alien dude he just doesn't talk much. He doesn't have many expressions. There's not much activity for him. So I knew that if I was able to pitch a Teal'c story, that not only would the producers be happy, but it would make Chris happy, because the actors like it when they can do something and that challenges them. And so that became, I think it's called The Other Side, where the crew goes to a planet where evolution is the myth and creationism. The whole premise is that all the planets were life appeared because of the aliens. It wasn't that it evolved. Human life is on all those planets because of the aliens who put them there. So, but I made Chris injured, not Chris, but Teal'c, and put him in a cave with a scientist. So it left him vulnerable, and he really got to express some range. Sometimes you do things like Foothold, where I had all the crew taken over by aliens, and they were all strung up from the rafters, literally covered in KY jelly. And I remember Don Davis, I adored that man, and he's since passed, but he came up to me and he's like, sometimes I wonder what goes through your writers' minds. 2
That was a nice
hours in
impression
a
of him.
harness. Isn't it? He was from
Yes, that
Southern
was good.
Missouri, and I heard him talk. I met him on set, and I heard him describe getting the script the night before. I was like, Don, are you from Missouri by chance? And he went, yeah, Southern Missouri. And I was like, yeah, I grew up in St. Louis. You talk like my dad. So just the way he talked and the timbre of it and the expressions he used were exactly the same. So hope that answered
that was the
Lori.
day that the entire cast hated your guts going forward.
They did. They did. I felt bad. I didn't know any better, but it was really fantastic episode. They did a good job.
Wayne, do you have a final question or any final thoughts you want to share?
just for Heather, on the script writing, when I was looking at the scripts, I didn't see it say like act one or scene one. Is that not used anymore?
The act structure might be used. It's, I think, probably for like the network shows. It would be, because that says, hey, commercial break. On the streaming shows, it might be or it might not be. It really depends. So I actually have it. I know Stranger Things is up on there somewhere. I'll just pop over to Handmaid's Tale, because episodes are really just one long episode these days. Yeah, Handmaid's Tale doesn't have it. I know Mad Men doesn't have it. That was really just an indicator of, here's a commercial. When you don't have commercials, then you don't have a need to point out the act structure.
I was thinking it was there, to show location or change in location, that sort of thing.
That's going to be your slug lines, because scenes. So on the script, sorry, I know that this is going a little bit over. If you see here, and that's going to, if you read one of the books, they'll explain the slug lines. Exterior Waterford House day. That shows you anytime you see a slug, that's a change in location or a change in camera position, which also means new scene. This is your description. So I know that this is my cover shot. This is like a cut to, and then this scene goes on. They measure in eighths of a page, and then this is the next scene. So the production department really does read the scripts in their own way. The Final Draft software, the Movie Magic software, will integrate with the scheduling software to produce schedules and things like that. Production's experts in this sort of thing.
Thank you.
Cool. John, do you have do you have a final question or any final thoughts?
Well, I appreciate all you're saying. One of the things I wanted to do was more like a cyberpunk movie. And, I'm always thinking about the music and the visuals, but I'm a terrible writer. I find that, I'm not a big gift to the gab type of person, So I sometimes find it difficult to think about what to have people say. It's like I might have some concepts that I want to put forth, but how to maybe sometimes have them express certain things, It's like I want them to go through certain emotional things, but as far as what they're saying, I don't know. I don't know, because so I when you say that first draft is tough, I'm like okay, I think I get it. It's like sometimes you just gotta rough it out and say help.
Right. And if you're not a dialogue driven individual, if it doesn't just come to you, script writing may not be the format for you. I mean, I'm not going to discourage anyone from pursuing this. I'm noodling offering some kind of remote class, because I've realized how many prose writers don't really understand how to write dialogue and scenes, like in a scene thing where you're picturing what do we see and what do we hear. So you tend to go toward the whole, like, I'm going to describe everything, and I'm going to, there's a lot more that goes into a short story than goes into a script. So like, what do you do if you can only write what you can see or hear on screen? That will distill your scene a little bit better. It makes things a little bit easier.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
but
just
that may not be you. So, but write what you want to write, because it makes you happy.
I guess it's tough because, I look at some films, for example, because like Blade Runner, or even like the new Dune, I'm like, sometimes they'll just have these scenes where there's just cinematics, not much, it's just giving you the feel of the place, not really telling.
Dominic, address that one, because that's an auteur.
Well, I mean that's visual storytelling, right? I mean, there's a school of thought that an excellent film is a film where you could turn the volume down, not hear a word of dialogue, and you get the entire experience. Okay. And certainly Dune is a film like that. I mean, yeah, it helps to understand what the hell's going on, but the visual storytelling is so rich and the world building is so amazing that, you can get the gist of it without necessarily having heard it. Now, I like dialogue as well. I mean, it's a lot of it's great to have, but that's key, and that's where as the writer and the director are working in collaboration, right? Where the writer is like they're setting up this world, they're building it out there, and they're creating a strong enough foundation, a strong enough blueprint that the director can then come in and hopefully work harmoniously and take what's on the page and expand upon that and bring it to life, really breathe life into it. And that's in Denis, I can't pronounce his last name. Why can't I pronounce his name?
Villeneuve, I think.
Villeneuve. I mean, all of his stuff is just, he's one of the best visual directors working today. I mean, you're always in for a treat when you see his work. So
Atmosphere is always part
guess
of the storytelling process.
What's that?
Atmosphere is definitely still part of the storytelling process as well, and something that you can still communicate to the audience, even without dialogue.
Yes.
Right.
Well, I mean, obviously there's a lot to it. I guess there's a part of me is like, where do you draw the line where now it's too much? Because even like in the movie, the recent movie Dune, I'm like, man, this thing feels like it's stretching out a bit. I mean,
that is there's a difference between a deliberately slower paced film, which that one is, and something being overstuffed and overlong, like the season finale of Stranger Things 4, which is like a half an hour too long. I mean, for God's sake, let's just get through this thing.
It was like the extended Lord of the Rings, where it's like the film's ended and an hour later it's still going after the ending has already happened.
Or any Steven Spielberg movie, if you'll notice, all of his movies have a fourth act. When you think the movie's over, it's not yet over. We're going to have a couple scenes at the very end.
Yeah.
So I think just to wrap up your question, John, I mean, it's because, I want to take this back to everybody. If you're having trouble with some element of the platform that you're using, don't use that platform. No one cares if that your great ideas in script form. Let me explain. I had a friend who is a gifted comedy writer, and earlier in her career, she wanted to write about her parents. She was going to write a one-woman show about her parents dying within 18 days of each other. She's Vietnamese. She's Vietnamese, yeah. Bonnie. And her Vietnamese mother, who'd been a war bride, died, and then her father died 18 days later, and she had to take her mother's ashes to her father's funeral. They were divorced. And so she sent me the script for her one-woman show, and I'm like, dude, this doesn't work. And this is how you know you have good critiquers, because they got to be able to tell you this sucks. This is not working. And I am that person, and my friends know it, so they don't come to me if they don't want to hear it. But I said, this is essays. This is humorous essays. This is David Sedaris. This is Irma Bombeck. This is like, pick one. These are like 4 individual essays. And then she went back, rewrote them. It got her a couple jobs on shows, because format is very important for the story. If you're not great at dialogue, and then like, don't write television, first of all, because television is all dialogue. Movies can get away with a lot less, but movies right now are mostly either indies or they're superhero movies. So like, realize what's out there that could be a canvas for it, or it might be a video, or it might be a photo exhibit. There's a lot of ways to get your art out there.
Okay.
Brooke, do you have a last question or final thought you want to share?
She let me know that she had to take an emergency.
Oh.
So she's still on the Zoom, but she's
Okay. Well, in that case, Bowen.
Well, I mean, there is so much I could say, like, especially, and it grew just the longer this went on, but I just want to say thank you guys so much for being able to talk about this. It has been more than a treat to talk with you all, and then to not just ask my own questions, but all the answers you've just been given all around. So I'll try to keep this short because we are a little bit over time. I guess something for both of you. There's so many other things I could ask. Oh my gosh, but
we can come back. I told Cassie, it's like, we'll come back. We can come back individually.
But you have to bring us out there, because we love Southern Oregon. So we want plane tickets next time.
We love Oregon.
Dom, it's funny you bring that up, but Bowen, let me just cut in for a second, because I did want to talk to both of you afterwards. KCC in May, we did our first Comic-Con, And
Oh,
very cool.
it was a huge success. Our keynote speakers were buddies of mine who are the screenwriters for the Sonic the Hedgehog films.
Oh, cool.
And I want to try to work some of those connections. And immediately my wheels were thinking for next year's Comic-Con, could we maybe have you come on to talk a little bit about Mortal Kombat stuff? Video games and film go hand in hand with any sort of Comic-Con event. So if you had cause to come out here, maybe mid-May next year, you could come out and
I'll have a place to
Comic-Con.
stay.
This is true. Doing private stuff like this is no problem. Anything that's public, where I'm like out, like where I could be videotaped by people and stuff like that, has to go through Warner Brothers PR. They're incredibly stingy with our time.
We've run into roadblocks like that before too. Like there was a lot of things Pat and Josh could not talk about, and they kept getting questioned about Sonic 3. So they're going, NDAs, folks, they cannot discuss anything about Sonic 3. Stop asking. Sorry, Bowen, I cut you off.
And then also not to poach from Kurt at all, but also the KCC Comic Con is not the only con type event going around in Southern Oregon as well, but I'll keep that under wraps for now as well, not to first come, first serve. But anyways, either way, my little addendum that I'll start with first is that would you guys be available for any follow-up questions, just at any point in general? Because there's always so many things that I'd be curious about. You guys have definitely a lot of resources, but outside of that, I guess the broadest question I could ask is or are there stories that you guys have read or seen that have particularly had a strong impact on you throughout the course of your life?
Stories.
Oh, sure.
It's pretty much of any kind.
You want to start Godfather Man, or I could start?
I mean, certainly in films, the formative ones for me are The Godfather, which I didn't see until I was in college, and I'm Italian American, and it was my Korean roommate who's like, dude, you haven't seen The Godfather? What the hell's wrong with you? So he introduced me to the world of the Corleone family, and that just blew my mind. But films like that, Amadeus, just the filmmaking is just so phenomenal. And when you really study it and sort of see what they were doing, I mean, that was film school in 6 hours, right? It's just watching those films. In terms of books, there's Dan Simmons' book Hyperion is stuck with me for absolutely ever.
Oh man, that's one I wish they'd make into a
I
series.
know.
Oh my gosh,
it would be amazing.
Nobody's
ever done with it.
Incredible. I'm glad they did The Expanse, but I mean, man, when they do Hyperion, wow.
Yeah, that'd be something.
Watch The Expanse, Cassidy.
There you go.
Everyone watched The Expanse.
Did you?
It's just I think it's more recently, The Wire, from beginning to end. I mean, that's a masterwork. I'm rewatching it again now as I make dinner, so it's really great. So yeah, there's a lot of really amazing stuff out there for sure.
I mean, for me, it was a recent one that I love movies that I remember The Sixth Sense just blowing my mind. I want to do something like that. The Arrival, Arrival, because The Arrival is Charlie Sheen.
Yes.
Arrival by Eric Heiser from a short story by Ted Chiang. I actually know Eric. He'd sent me an early version of Arrival, the script, to read. Oh. And I wrote him back. I had actually read the short story when I found out he was he was attached to the project. I read the short story, which is mind-blowing. I read his script, which was the same and yet completely different. I emailed him back. I said, "You asshole, you made me burst into tears in my doctor's office." They wondered what was wrong with me. And then the finished film was something else, again, completely different. And it's a movie I just love. I kind of like those quiet character stories. I love The Americans, a series that I will watch over and over because it's not a story about spies. It's a story about marriage.
Yeah.
About love and country and marriage. And those are the kind of things. The Expanse, once you get through the first season, Cassidy, you need to get through the first season, which is unbearable. Some of the best women in television, women in power in television. I love The Expanse. So there's always going to be, and Buffy, which will always be my first love. There's always something new. And it's funny because, when your favorite show ends, especially back when there was 5 networks, it was always like, oh, I'm so sad that ended. I'll never love another show as much. And then something else kind of comes along that just makes you want to stay in that world for a while. Doctor Who, the David Tennant years, the David Donna era, some of the best standalone episodes of character sci-fi out there.
A lot of times I experienced back in that era where I would get emotionally invested in a show that would get canceled prematurely. And I'm left for years wondering what happened. Where does it go? What's happened? And I'm sure there's filmed, edited in the can episodes that never aired. So maybe they did explain where they were going, but always left on that cliffhanger, and then they never respond to the cliffhanger.
That's where the fan fiction comes from, and certainly
exactly.
in the case of
fiction.
MK, the stories were so thin because they're, like you said, you had these little blurbs of what was going on, and so people would fill in the blanks and write their own stories. And it's been amusing for me to watch later on where they get mad at us for not doing what they wrote, and it's just like, no.
And it's been funny in that respect too, Dom, how sometimes shows have been revived because of the fans.
Sure.
Like YouTube been talking about sci-fi. A great example of that is the Orville, which Seth MacFarlane's show that was on Fox and had this cult following, but for whatever reason Fox wanted to kill it, and they eventually just said, screw it, we're going to Hulu. And it just came back with its next season, but it was like a 2-3 year break between. But that's a show that was essentially dead, and fans brought it back. There's shows like Firefly only had 1 season, and then it got its own movie, and the movie became extremely popular. And there's like petitions every year, bring back Firefly. A show like Futurama got canceled like 5 times, and now they're still going back and making more episodes. So it's funny how sometimes fan demand these days can have such a profound impact in keeping shows alive long after networks or whoever the funding agent may be, whatever studio's behind it, wants it dead to move on.
But it's not necessarily want it dead so much. Like Netflix canceled Santa Clarita Diet, which was one of our favorite shows. And the calculus behind that was not that this show is loved and it's great. It's that in year 3, their contracts were written so that all the actors are going to get paid an astounding amount of money. Like if they stick around, they're going to get paid really well in 3rd year. So the Netflix model, at least for some period of time, was cancel them in year 2. Even if it's going well, we're not going to pay that. It's all money. And yeah, fan love is meaningful, but I don't think it's necessarily as meaningful as people want to think it is. Dominic, would you agree with that?
I mean, I would agree, but even like with the Orville, I mean, Hulu made a business decision of like, okay, if we fund season 3 of Orville, this makes business sense for us. And certainly fan love can keep a show alive. Certainly that's what kept Star Trek, the original series, going after its initial run. But I can guarantee you that if the Star Trek the motion picture had flopped, there would be no more. And certainly it did well enough for them to get to 2, and then Wrath of Khan was a barn burner, and that set them up for the next several films and kept Star Trek going. I mean, if it wasn't for Ricardo Montalban and his chest, they probably would not have more Star Trek.
What does barn burner mean? Like it did poorly, or
no?
barn
Barn
burner
burner
is
is like it's
Wrath of
hugely
Khan
popular.
It was on
Yeah,
fire.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, it was. Yeah, that was huge. I just actually started an article recently that was talking about the second Star Trek film and how but for that movie and Nicholas Meyer's work and everybody else's work on that
I was so
Star
bummed
Trek
to
as we know it
learn
would still exist.
that was a fake chest. I saw him one time. I was like, that was fake. I was like,
No,
oh,
I
man.
heard it wasn't.
No, he brought it out one time, and I was just
Oh.
like in one of those, interviews, and I was just like, really? I
That
was like,
That was
no.
the stunt chest.
No, maybe.
stunt chest.
Yeah.
Total stunt chest.
I choose to believe that it's real.
I'm with you. I'll stay with you.
And on that note, Ricardo Montalban's chest.
But
Cassidy,
Bowen
are we overtime? Are you the boss,
wait,
Cassidy? I don't
wait,
even
we
know.
are way over time. I wanted to leave Cassidy for the last word, but Bowen, if you have something super quick.
Tack on question for Dom. Do you have a favorite MK character? I assume as a writer, it's like they're your children. You can't really pick a favorite.
I have a guess.
I try not. I always don't ever publicly say if I have a favorite or not.
That's
'cause
true. You
Okay.
can't say
I
that,
don't. I
no.
don't. People do that.
Actors
but,
get really weird with their egos.
Yeah. It's and they all have their challenges. I mean, certainly, so they all love them in different ways. It's Johnny is different from Scorpion, is different from Katana, but they've all got their special place. And the key is just to keep that in mind as we're writing them.
We
You
love
had a
our children equally.
Have you had a favorite DLC character?
Like, oh, a DLC guest?
Yeah, like a guest character.
Oh my
Like
gosh.
personally, I'm preferential to Rambo, but like you guys have had so many really cool ones. You guys, a comment that I saw on YouTube one time is that Mortal Kombat is now pretty much becoming the Smash Bros, but of like 80s action movie heroes.
Yes, and
where
we're running
they-
out of them, unfortunately. We've done them all.
Yeah.
We're gonna be doing the 90s.
So suddenly Samurai Cop is going to become an unlockable character, or like all those really bad
Yeah,
like canon
exactly.
B movies that were like super low budget.
Yeah, I mean, it's been fun because this whole, when I look at the people I've had a chance to work with now because of this, these are all like the people that were icons when I was a kid. So it's like we had Peter Weller in for RoboCop, obviously Stallone in for Rambo, and why is his name escaping me? The gentleman's the voice of Spawn. Keith David.
Yeah,
Keith David.
We both worked with Christopher Lambert. Weirdly,
Yes, worked with Christopher Lambert. That was crazy because
like
he came in
15
and
years
did Raiden.
apart. Yeah,
Yes.
it was very
Yeah, 'cause
funny.
Heather-
It's like, oh yeah, I worked on Highlander 4 and met him through that, and it's just so funny because Dominic got to work with him in a completely different format.
Yeah, he's because he was the voice of Raiden in the film, so he was a guest voice, and as we're doing the voiceover session, he's like, I'm not going to do his accent because he'll do it even worse than I would do my other accents.
And he's
like, when is Highlander going to be in Mortal Kombat? Like, come on, like when is this going to happen? We got to make this work. It's not up to me. I would love it, but it's not up to me.
Chronic.
Bowen, we're cutting you off because
But-
Cassidy's going to talk now.
Yeah.
We'll have to go to
That's
bed.
on
We're
me.
2 hours
Yeah.
ahead of you. We
Yeah.
They're
gotta
2
go.
hours ahead of us.
And we're
so
older.
We're
So
keeping
you were asking
Okay.
about asking other questions. Find me on Twitter. Find me on LinkedIn. As long as I'm
Okay.
not revealing privileged information, I'm happy to answer questions.
Cassidy, the floor is yours.
Okay, I wrote so many notes, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but I do have topics of conversation to message you on Facebook later. But anyway, thank you so much both for coming. It's awesome. So fun to have you guys here, and you guys just shared so many wonderful things. And Heather, I need to learn how to write a good rewrite because I always just go with my first draft, and my first draft is trash. So I need
All
to
first
learn
drafts
how
are
to-
trash.
All first drafts are trash. And poor Tommy has had to read so many of my science communication articles.
Where is he anyway?
He's right here. He just
Hi,
got
Tommy.
he just got, hey guys, just walked
Good to
in.
see you.
Hello.
Also, I have the chinchillas to blame. I was not a nerd before I married into this family, and now I love Star Trek. If y'all have seen Strange New Worlds, that's the best television
Great
series
things.
I've ever seen in my life. I didn't play D&D, but y'all raised 2 wonderful D&D players, so thank you for telling them how to make a story because their characters are always so good and so fun to play with. But anyway, I won't gush anymore. And okay,
Oh,
I
no,
did
we
have one
like it.
question for Dom.
Go ahead.
Dom, I asked Heather,
Yeah.
Heather asked your question, but Dom, so you were saying earlier how you weren't sure, like they were never sure where to place you with your skill set and stuff. So
Yeah.
with this role that you're in now, did you find like in some weird way where you weren't expecting to go into this role, like you feel like all your skills kind of match up with what you do now?
Yeah, oh, for sure. Certainly, and as Heather was saying, I got this opportunity because it was in Chicago, right? Other places I would not have been able to get in, and it's allowed me to show a lot of what I can do here and learn a lot. So yeah, it's all sort of come together here, and we continue to turn out hit games, and as long as we can keep doing that, I'll keep working here. So there's these people, the classic McLean Stevenson who left MASH. After Wonder Seeds, like leaving the hit show, or David Caruso leaving. It's like, no, just like stay, get paid, for God's sake, don't leave.
It's like
really
how
well-run
many
studio too.
it's like how many times have the Rolling Stones gone on a farewell tour at this point and are still doing it,
There you go. Awesome. Well, y'all are so wonderful. Thank you so much for going over time with us tonight. We were having too much fun chatting with you guys. So we'll definitely have to have you back in person, ? Maybe?
Yeah, Heather and Dom, thank you very much. We'd love to stay in touch with you two going forward. And if there is an opportunity to maybe have you guest for something. I totally understand it from a corporate side, you can't, but if you can, or maybe just like zoom in once or twice. If, Heather, if you even want to come on to talk to some of our students next week about script writing and basic storytelling, we'd love to have you do that. But
Sure.
thank you so much for joining us. This was really informative and a lot of fun. So we really appreciate you doing it, even being a couple hours ahead of us.
Oh, very
Oh,
happy
yeah.
to do it. It reminds us why we do it. Our
Aw.
kids actually don't think we're cool. They're only cluing into the fact that I'm cool. They kind of knew that, but our kids' friends clearly know Dominic. So, and his game. So this is nice.
You guys
Nice
are some of
little
the coolest
ecoboost,
people I've
but-
ever met.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Thank you. But yeah, we really enjoyed it. So thank you for this opportunity
Yeah, thanks a lot.
to get in here and talk about the thing that we love.
Thank you, everybody,
Thanks,
for joining us. We will be back to do this again the first Thursday of August at 6 o'clock. Appreciate everyone
Good
coming
night,
out.
all.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks again. Bye.